TRIBEathlon podcast, finding out how ordinary people do extraordinary things.
Genuinely, none of them are nice at the time, but you look back at them and you're proud of the achievement.
That was Sean Conway, first, fastest and furthest. Welcome to the next edition of the TRIBEathlon podcast, where we try and get under the skin to find out how people that are achieving the most extraordinary things are doing it. And in today's episode, I'm going to interview Sean Conway, an incredible guy, but I'll tell you more about him in a minute. But before I do, I just want to remind you, on Instagram, please share a photo with the hashtag TRIBEathlon. That's tribe, like the tribe, athlon. Hashtag TRIBEathlon. Photos while you're out swimming, cycling, running, competing, whatever it is, on your own or with your tribe. But just some amazing photos of where you're training and competing. And who knows, in time, we may even have a prize for the best photo on TRIBEathlon, but I'll certainly be mentioning my favourite each episode going forward. So anyway, on to Sean Conway. Now, Sean Conway, I first discovered him when I read his book that tells the story. It's called Hell or High Water, and it tells the story of him becoming the first person to swim from Land's End to John O'Groats. It's an absolutely brilliant book. It's a fantastic story, and what an incredible achievement. But Sean wanted to do the 3 Fs. He wanted to be the first person to do something, the fastest and the furthest. So he then went on to do the Furthest triathlon, which was a triathlon he created around Great Britain. An incredible achievement with a great documentary on Amazon Prime. And then also he wanted to be the fastest, so he set the world record for the fastest cycling across Europe. Again, another brilliant documentary on Amazon Prime about that. He is an incredible adventurer. He's also done lots of other things, and he's got amazing other things in the pipeline. And I'm sure you will enjoy the conversation and interview I did with Sean as much as I enjoy chatting to him. This episode is brought to you by Lucky Saint alcohol-free beer. Now, I drink a lot of alcohol-free beer. I discovered it originally after a 142-mile ride through the Welsh mountains on a really hot day. And it's just such a refreshing drink to have after a long ride. But you don't generally want alcohol at that point. So over the years, I've tried most of the alcohol-free beers I can find, and my absolute favourite is Lucky Saint. The branding looks brilliant, the bottle looks fantastic. When it's poured into a glass, it looks fantastic, and it actually tastes amazing too, as good as most alcoholic beers I've found. It's a brilliant product, and I absolutely love it. And if I'm going to drink alcohol-free beer, that is the one I go to. It's just a really high quality product. And if you're coming back from a long ride or a long run, you want a refreshing drink, but you don't necessarily want alcohol because it's going to go straight to your head. And equally, if you're going out on a long ride or a long run in the morning, you don't want alcohol so that you wake up with a fuzzy head. So it's just a brilliant solution for those people that take their health seriously and their training seriously. So I genuinely love Lucky Saint. You can find out more at luckysaint.co. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And if you hang on to the end of this podcast, I'll even have a discount code for you. So that's luckysaint.co. Just give it a try. This podcast is also brought to you by the TRIBEathlon app, the best place to find all of the running, swimming, cycling or combination events out there, the best place to find people to train with, and the marrying of the two, helping you find out where your friends are competing so that you can enter the events. Because we all know that if you enter a triathlon that your friends are doing, it's so much more fun than doing one where you know nobody. So go to tribeathlon.com, download the app, and find your next event. So Sean, thank you. Welcome to the TRIBEathlon podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, I am a prolific listener of books. I listen to a lot of books when I'm cycling. I listen to a lot of books when I'm running. I am a dyslexic though, and therefore I read very slowly. So you should be honoured that this book is one of the only books I've read in quite a while. But it was absolutely brilliant. Hell and High Water. I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm delighted that you can join us. So thanks very much for coming on. Let's kick things off by, for those people that don't know you, can you tell them a bit about your history, how you've got to where you are at the moment, and just kind of summarise the craziness that you've been up to in the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's been wild for the last 10 years. But thanks for having me. It's an honour to be on. 10 years ago, long story short, 10 years ago, I used to be... Well, no, let's go back. Let's go way back. When I was a teenager, I dreamt of being this amazing, world-traveling, world-renowned National Geographic photographer. That was the dream. I just wanted to travel the world using the camera.
And you were growing up in Zimbabwe, I think, weren't you?
I was born in Zimbabwe. I have Irish family, so I've got an Irish passport. I then grew up in South Africa. And then moved back to the UK with the English side of my family. So mum's side's English, dad's Irish. Nearly 20 years ago now. So yeah, in 100 years, sort of done a whole loop from England and Ireland back down to Africa and then back again. But yeah, growing up in Africa certainly fueled that adventurous side of my way of thinking, I guess. And you know, I got into photography really young. I was probably 10 or 11 when I sort of started actively wanting to sort of take a camera wherever we went. I remember I had this rubbish, I think you got it free with a magazine subscription, you know, it had 3 exposure settings. I remember it was sort of sunny, cloudy, and nighttime. You just turned the front of the lens. But I remember just being obsessed by it as a kid, you know, and then went on and did it at school and did very well, and that was going to be my thing, you know. I was just like, I was Sean the photographer, you know, from an early age, as sort of probably around 14, 15, it was just always like, oh well, you're going to be a photographer, that's your thing, Sean, you know, and you're good at it, great. And then I sort of, you know, I think a lot of people in their 20s will probably relate to this, well certainly at the end of their 20s. you kind of, I found it quite difficult to make good decisions in my 20s. You know, I didn't quite realize that I was still going to live potentially another 70 years from when I was 20, right? And quite realistically, so, you know, so in my 20s, I had just this like, I didn't think about that. So all I wanted to do was like be successful now and earn loads of money now. And, you know, and it wasn't, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, did society pressurize you into sort of trying to live a certain way of life? No, society didn't. It was all me. You know, I was just weak-minded and didn't have much vision. And although I sort of had this dream in my head, I never actually applied it. You know, I was like, oh, I really want to work for National Geographic. You know, and that was the dream. But actually, did I apply for any jobs? No, of course I didn't, because I just got stuck in my own personal sort of drive just to kind of earn more money. Basically, that was kind of the root of it all, really. Which inevitably, you know, doesn't end very well because, you know, you earn the money and then you just spend more. Well, actually, you know what you do? You actually land up buying just more expensive versions of what you already own, and that kind of is just that was a waste. Like, it worked so hard to earn all this money, and then all I did is bought a more expensive bottle of wine at the supermarket, or bought a slightly more high-resolution TV, or bought a slightly more expensive car. I mean, they all kind of still do the same function, right? So I found my lifestyle really didn't go up at all with more money. In fact, it went down, because to earn more money, you actually usually comes with higher stress environments. You know, a self-employed photographer, you know, the more clients you have, the bigger clients you have, the more stress they put on you and that sort of thing. So eventually, turned 30, was like, why am I not traveling the world? Oh yeah, I should mention I was a school portrait photographer. That's what I landed up doing, by the way, to earn money. Which, I mean, you basically become a glorified passport photographer. Really, you just sort of, there's no creativity in it. It's just a numbers game. The more children you photograph at schools, the more money you earn, and that's as simple as that. Each time you press the button of a child, that child is worth some money to me. That was it. There was nothing else to it. And that wasn't very, very good for my mindset. So when I turned 30, I walked away from the business that I set up with my friend James. He bought my shares for £1. And that was it. I was 30 years old. I had no A-levels and I didn't go to university. Photography was just a kind of a hobby that or passion really, that I eventually kind of became the way I paid my bills. So at 30, I was like, well, what do I do? I was like, oh, well, and literally, this was like, I'm quite surprised now that back then I had the gumption to think of this as a concept. But basically, my concept was, I want to go traveling. I don't have any money to go traveling because I just, I'd spent it over 10 years on better cars and a nice apartment, and then I was renting a nice flat rather than a rubbish one. And so I thought, well, how can I go traveling if I don't have any money? So I thought, well, I could save up some money. But I was sort of doing the maths. I was like, oh, I'd have to go and work somewhere that's low skilled because I don't have any A-levels or anything. Photography I wasn't interested in. So I thought, well, I can't do that. So I thought, well, you know what? Why don't I try and break some sort of world record in the world of travel? And because I'd seen, even now, people who row the Atlantic and climb Everest, and they have logos on them. You're like, well, Ben Saunders goes to the South Pole and he has a Land Rover on him, and I was like, well, that's cool. This must be a thing. People must do these records, and there must be companies that help them fund the expenses of it. And that was literally, I thought, well, it must be a thing. People must do it, so maybe I could do it. So the first thing I sort of thought I would try and do is the round the world cycle record I thought of it back in 2011. And I was going to do it in 2011 until I heard about a race that was happening in 2012, a round the world bike race, the first ever one. And I entered that and thought, well, if there's a race, it might even be better chance of finding a sponsor, And that was it, really. That was it. That kind of set me on this new kind of path.
And you didn't complete that race, I don't think, did you? You had a nasty bike accident, didn't you?
Yeah, that was soul destroying. So to put into perspective, it was around my 30th birthday. So it was was April 2011. It was a few months after that where I just was like, I'm miserable, and it was all pretty quickly. So it must have been sort of May, June. I packed it all in, and I think it was like July, August when I sort of thought about this round the world bike ride. So from call it July all the way through till February, I was just training hard, trying to get sponsorship, which I got quite early on. I was quite lucky there. To get the funding for flights and accommodation and things like that. Training 40 hours a week, which is, 20 of those hours were always on Saturday. I was always sort of doing 4 a.m. till midnight on Saturdays. So, I was doing 20 hours a week really with one long day, which I counted as training, which it was, of course. So yeah, I was putting everything into that ride, and I started well. I head down to Spain, Morocco, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, and I was in America doing my American leg. So I was 4,000 something miles in, and unfortunately someone was just on their mobile phone and speeding at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was dark, it was raining, there was traffic lights ahead, so the red lights and the red tail lights, I can understand why. And also, I was cycling on a road that if you knew, you would never in a million years cycle, ever. But, I'm just following a line on a map, aren't I? Because I was legally allowed to cycle on it, but it was suicide. There was no hard shoulder, really. It was busy, but I didn't know, again.
And this was in the States at the time, right?
Yeah, in Arkansas, in America. But it was a terrible accident. I don't remember anything. I woke up in hospital the next day, and actually, well, later that day, but the next day from when I remember. So I don't remember getting up. I went to bed, got up that morning, was cycling along, and then got hit. But this wonderful family took me in and cared for me, Martin and Missy Carey. The driver admitted fault, and there was none of this sort of like, where's your insurance, we'll throw you out the back door of the ambulance. None of that. The Americans were phenomenal. They were just the friendliest, kindest people. And actually, even before and after the accident, I found American drivers super respectful to cyclists. Like, genuinely, like in the South, firstly, like in Texas, the hard shoulder is often wider than the main road. And on the white line, they have these massive rumble strips that are so aggressive, you actually can't even cycle over them. You actually have to come to a stop, pick your bike up, and put them over there. They're sort of these dug-in divots into the tarmac. So it's great. I mean, the car, if your car goes on there, you're sort of like scared you're going to blow a tire, So you really are safe. And then the times when the roads are a bit quieter with no big hard shoulder, I found drivers would hang way, way back, So yeah, I mean, everyone says, "Oh, America's terrible," because you do, unfortunately. You do hear, I got run over there, Mark Beaumont got run over there, James Cracknell got run over there.
I've had some scary experiences there as well. Yeah. I haven't found them all to be good either.
Yeah, and and I don't know why, because for the most part, I've found the drivers to be pretty respectful, but you just get unlucky, right? So that one didn't end well, and but I carried on. I carried on because, well, I mean, unless you're Mark Beaumont, you only get one chance to cycle around the world. Well, actually, though, Nick Sanders back in the 80s, he did it twice. He did it once and then thought he could do it faster, so he did it again. Phenomenal guy. He still currently has the record for cycling around Britain, which is about 5,000 miles. He did it in 22 days.
Oh, really?
Back in 1980, I want to say 84. It's still, Guy Martin tried it even. It's such a hard record to break.
That's incredible, isn't it? With all the tech today,
Nick Sanders, he's such a crazy guy. He eventually gave up cycling, got into motorbiking, and he actually holds the unofficial world record for motorbiking around the world. I say unofficial because Guinness, when they looked at the speed he would have had to have done, said, "This is irresponsible, we're not giving it." But he did it in 19 days. To motorbike around the planet. Yeah, crazy guy.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he doesn't live too far from me here in Wales. So you're
not in Wales now, are you? You're not in the Lake District.
No, I've recently moved to Wales. We've just had my son's 11 months old, and the lakes was amazing, but we were so isolated from the rest of the family. My wife's Welsh, and my mum lives down in the Cotswolds, and and we were living in the middle of the lake, so it's not like you get to Kendal and you're nearly there. We're sort of an hour further in, so yeah, we found our son wasn't seeing Granny and Granddad, and and Nana and cousins and that sort of thing. So we thought, let's move a bit further south so that he can be near his grandparents and our cousins and his cousins as well. And it's been great, to be honest. It's been amazing for him. And yes, of course, the Lake District is a phenomenal place to bring up children, but I think family is more important than living in a pretty landscape.
Well, I'm married to a Welsh girl as well, so
good man.
So where in Wales are you now then? Just roughly.
We're in North Wales. We're actually just inland from the border.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
About 20 minutes from Chester.
Brilliant. Nice part of the world.
It's super convenient. Like I fly away a lot, so actually Manchester Airport's 40 minutes from here, and the downside from the Lake District, firstly, it's so beautiful you never go anywhere else. You kind of just stay at home, but you also certainly never go to Cornwall, for example. It's just, especially with the young children, it's almost a 2-day drive really, unless you really want to push it. Whereas now, living in North Wales, you're just that little bit closer to go everywhere in the UK. It's almost slap bang in the middle. You've got Wales, you've got the Peak District, you can get to the Lake District pretty quickly. You're on the M5, M6 if you want to head to Cornwall. So yeah, it's great.
And have you got, you mentioned Cornwall, have you got some sort of affiliation with Cornwall? Because Carol, my wife, picked up this in a shop in Cornwall. She was just browsing and the lady said, oh, local hero, if your husband likes swimming or anything like that, you've got to buy that book. So hence I got it as a Christmas present. So
No.
have you got some link to Cornwall?
No, like personally, no, nothing at all. However, like Cornwall was the beginning of my swim, right?
Of course.
And they were just the most heartwarming, welcoming people in Cornwall. And I spent quite a big chunk in Cornwall, you know, all the way up just to before Devon, Heartland Point. So, and it was real tough at the beginning, you know, beginning of that swim. I was getting seasick. The crew were getting seasick, and but yeah, people were letting me stay. Like this one time, I swam ashore to have a break to sit out the tide, and then the little support yacht couldn't come in, and they had to go all the way to Newquay, which was ages away, and I had nothing. Literally, it was me and the girl in the kayak, M Bell. She was in the kayak, and so we're on this beach. All I have is my wetsuit. Nothing. I have no phone, no wallet, no nothing. And she's the same. She's just in the kayak. So eventually, we found this old lady who said, "Oh, you can come and stay at mine." And she was probably about near 80. She said, "Oh, don't worry, you can come and stay at mine. I need to go and have a surf first."
I remember it in the book. And
she just went down and she did some surfing, and then we went and stayed back at hers, and you know, she fed us and everything. It was great. So yeah,
well, I think that's what kind of got me into reading the book so quickly, was because we have a place in St Agnes, so we're down in St Agnes quite a lot, and just reading about you swimming that kind of stretch that I know so well. You know, I run, I cycle, I swim all along that stretch, but kind of reading, you know, and I mean, like the start of it. I mean, so for those listeners that don't know, you were the first person to swim from Land's End to John O'Groats, weren't you?
Yeah.
And I mean, let's be honest. At the start, you nearly didn't get through day one, did you?
Well, I nearly didn't get to the start line because I needed 250 pounds to fill my car up with diesel. So I had to go to the bank and ask for an overdraft.
And actually, that's one of the things I was going to talk to you about, and we can come back to you perhaps. But the amount of organisation, but also sometimes the lack of organisation before these things is quite amazing as well, isn't it? But yeah, so tell us about that first day swimming from Land's End.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, my skipper didn't turn up through no fault of his own. He missed the bus from London. So he was the guy who was dealing with all the tides and when I can swim and when I can't swim. And I was meant to sort of set off at around midday, I think it was. I can't remember now. And I didn't quite sort of realize how important it was to really swim, especially at Land's End at that time. And you know, I was faffing around with just, you know, a few interviews with Speedo. My sponsors were down there and they were sort of doing some filming, and it kind of ran over, but I didn't think much of it. I was like, 12-1, whatever. But yeah, it turns out that, you know, the tides really are super unforgiving, and I did really good progress towards Land's End because the tide was running out from Sen & Cove. So, because that's the other thing, I didn't have a boat to take me to the start. So to get in at Sennen, which is a couple of miles away, swim to the start, turn around and swim back. And then when I tried to swim back, the tide was so strong. I was swimming in one place, and eventually I had to swim nearer the edge and swim up, and eventually I was knackered. So that was day one, and that was super tough. And I remember Speedo. When I finished, I went out. I was like, "Where are the Speedo guys?" They're like, "They left, mate." They were like, "Oh my god, this guy's never going to make it. We're out of here." I don't think it was quite like that, but it certainly felt like it. But yeah, and then I tried to swim the next day, and we were just all seasick, you know, because by this time Jez had come in from London, so we took the bus. It was hilarious. Like, it really was I'm trying to scrape the barrel on trying to pull this off the ground, because Speedo came on board with some funding, but it would have been enough had I swum for as long as I thought it was going to take. It was going to take, well, I thought it was going to take 2.5 months, but it landed up being 4.5 in the end, mostly due to bad weather. We had the support boat that was just not big enough to deal with sort of even sort of 5-6 foot waves, you know. It was just too small. So, because you can kind of swim in anything, but if we'd had a bigger support boat, I could have swum in pretty much every day, really. But there was that. Yeah, you know, there was times where I remember, you know, jumping on a bus with my wetsuit just to kind of get to the start point where Em and I had swum to and had to bury the kayak in the sand. You know, so there I am, literally like waiting at a bus stop with my, you know, with my £1.50, jumping on the bus, getting to the start point, and then carrying on. But yeah, so and those first few weeks were tough, you know, of course, because you know you're never good at anything the first time you do it, and I just didn't train enough because, you know, you mentioned it earlier. There was, you know, there's a lot of a lot comes across that I'm super unprepared, which is often true. However, in my mind, if you over prepare for everything, when it goes wrong, you kind of know it's gone wrong because you've planned and prepared for that thing. Whereas I like to leave some flexibility. Yes, you've got to prepare for the stuff that's going to quit, you know, make you fail. But you know, sometimes if you sort of let things naturally progress, if things are going wrong, you don't really know they're going wrong because you haven't really super planned that out. And that, you know, that's things like, you know, how many miles am I going to swim each day? Where am I going to sleep each night? Stuff like that. You know, you can't plan that too much otherwise, because inevitably that's definitely going to go wrong, you know?
I think that's a recurring theme through all of your challenges. There's certain things you go, why wasn't that something that you thought of beforehand? And yet, I know there's huge amounts of stuff to plan for these things. And yet, actually, I suppose you kind of made me think, it's a bit like when I was traveling kind of after university. Part of the fun of it is the fact that you are kind of adapting as you go, aren't you? And you're kind of finding out what you need to learn, you know, along the way. But I mean, it is absolutely incredible. And I mean, you know, being a swimmer, but kind of a swimmer as part of triathlon, I really enjoy open water swimming, but it can get a little bit monotonous. Particularly, you know, you can't see where you're going, you know, and you know, how do you get over that? I mean, clearly swimming from Land's End to John O'Groats. Remind me how long it took you and how you dealt with the monotony of what was a long day swimming.
I'm not sure I dealt with it very well back then. If I had to do that now, I've implemented much better coping strategies for dealing with that sort of thing nowadays, breaking things down. Then the fuel, and the only fuel really was this fear of failing again. So I'd failed on the round the world bike ride. Actually, what some people don't know, a lot of people don't know, is, but after I finished cycling around the world, I tried to get back into real life. I was living with my mum in a one-bedroom flat, a basement flat with no windows in Cheltenham. One bedroom. I was on the sofa in the living room, and I tried to get back into work. I was queuing up at the job centre. I was applying for photography jobs, although not with much passion. I really didn't want to get into photography, but what I was interested in is sort of the cycling industry. So I was looking at Sustrans, cycling charities. There was I think it's called Bike Works, which was a social enterprise getting people into cycling, trying to get people to cycle into work, bike mechanics, anything to do with cycling. I was applying for loads of jobs all over the place, and just getting nothing. Literally, it was 6 months that I was sort of doing the job centre, queuing up and going in every 2 weeks and telling them, where I've applied for jobs and that. And in that time, I didn't even get one reply email to say, I'm sorry, you haven't got it. Like, genuinely, like I didn't get nowhere near an interview, because on paper, I wouldn't employ me really. I have no A-levels. I didn't go to university. I'm this Zimbabwean, South African, Irish guy. I'm 32 years old, and I have no CV, nothing, because all I'd ever done was photography. I worked in Snappy Snap's photo lab for 6 years part-time while I was building up the photography. And then I've cycled around the world. So it's just like this real weird CV, like if you could call it that. So I mean, that's actually what forced me into doing the swim, because after a year of living with my mum, well, after 6 months of trying, my mum was like, yeah, you should not be living on a sofa with your mother at 32. You know, I think you should just do something. And I thought, well, actually, last time I had this stupid idea to cycle around the world, and I managed to get people to back it financially and companies to get on board and help me achieve it. And when I did it, I raised money for charity, and all of a sudden I had, you know, schools going, oh, can you come and talk to the kids? And I got a real buzz out of that. I got a real buzz out of the whole thing. I got a buzz out of the planning it. I got a buzz out of training hard and being fit and healthy. I got a buzz out of not doing it, although it's hindsight fun, you know. Actually, while I was doing it, I found it pretty miserable, but actually I got a buzz out of that misery, if you know what I mean. And then I enjoyed actually writing about it afterwards. So actually, all those things, you know, when I actually sat down after not getting any other work, I thought, actually, I enjoyed this whole process of sort of being a non-professional sportsman, which is, you know, I basically kind of am like an Olympian, but I just don't have the Olympics to go to. But I still have to look for sponsors, I still have to train, I still have to compete, I still have to win. And then once, if you're lucky and you do win, like all the Olympians, you end up going and doing the talk circuit and inspiring kids and companies, and you write books about your achievements, hopefully. So it's a similar thing. I just don't have the Olympics. So I got to basically think of my own Olympics and then win it. Which sounds kind of fun, but it's a fine balance, you know, because actually if it's too easy, no one's bothered to engage with you. And if it's too difficult, you either just become so sort of unreachable that it loses its your engagement with people. But also no one will fund the project, basically, if it's too crazy. Which is kind of where it's sort of fell into, really.
And you became pretty close with that with the swim, didn't you? Because you mentioned that Speedo sponsored you, but you were really scratching around trying to get the last bits of sponsorship and things like that, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, just people. Yeah, I mean, really, you know, this is 2000, end of 2012, but mainly 2013, and it was a real interesting climate for sponsorship, because social media was kind of building, and, you know, companies and brands knew that they could basically get marketing for free, really, through social media. That's changed a bit now. I think brands are now realizing that, you know, you can't just put free rubbish out on social media and get traction anymore. It's got to be good quality, everything. The consumer is really picky on quality now again, which for a while they weren't. They were happy to see rubbish, but because it was kind of on social media and live and real, it was like, cool. Whereas now, you know, if you do that badly, people are like, well, he's not made an effort, right? So it's nice. So brands are now actually investing a little bit more time in good video content and good brand campaigns and that, which is really exciting, because, you know, there I am. Actually, I sound like I know what I'm talking about now, but actually I just want to go out and break some records and raise money for charity. And it's, you know, I'm just lucky that these brands and things are now a bit more willing to help out. But back then it was difficult, you know, and especially with something where the risk of not getting to the end was super high. And also you couldn't, although social media was building, you couldn't leverage your entire sort of kind of sponsorship campaign based purely around social media. Now some people can, almost. I tend to stay away from it. I prefer to work with a brand on a bigger project rather than just likes and comments and views and, you know, insights. You know, I like to work with them on a corporate social responsibility level and product design level and, you know, all these other cool things, rather than just like, oh, how many people can view your video, you know. So back then it was like, well, I might get in the paper if I get to the end, I might not. So it was a hard sell, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I wouldn't have sponsored me, to be honest.
But I mean, it's that, you know, the story of you swimming Britain is an incredible story, and you kind of it's a really, really good book, and that I really enjoyed. So you know, I highly recommend that people read it, because there's certain stages where you're thinking, surely you're never going to actually, I mean, you ended up finishing way later than you expected, which meant the water was way colder. The conditions were way worse, particularly on the northwest corner of Scotland. I can't remember what that's called, but
yeah.
just absolutely incredible. And then from there, you went on to, now this is the one bit I haven't seen on Amazon Prime, but you went on to Running Britain, is that right?
Yeah, so after I'd cycled it already, I then swam it, and then, you know, obviously, I also quite like just multidiscipline things. I kind of get bored if I just do one thing loads and loads and loads. I like the challenge of bouncing around, so I thought running would be the next obvious thing in my head because I'd done swimming and cycling. And obviously to complete the triathlon of Britain, of course, you know, I was going to run it. You know, it was almost a no-brainer. I actually attempted it first time in September 2013. No, 2014, August, September 2014. I got 300 miles in and I tripped taking a selfie. It was pretty awkward. But I think, you know what, I probably would have got injured anyway. That was just the last straw. On my right leg, where basically I had terrible patella tracking, my kneecap tracking, basically, and that was just the final straw. So I had to pull out of that. Yeah, I was pretty gutted, you know. I was just like, you know, I'd put a lot of energy and effort into trying to do that. And I kind of went home, back to my mum still. Well, actually, I just bought an old boat that I was renovating. So I was kind of living still half with my mum and half on this old World War II gunboat that I got on eBay and in Worcester on the River Severn. And my mum was in Cheltenham, so actually it was quite convenient. I would, you know, just pop back and forth when I needed a shower, I'd go back to mum.
Which isn't very often, having watched your documentaries.
And then, you know, sort of February, March came around and, you know, well, January, February, and I was like, you know, I'm itching to get back on it. So I announced it again. I was like, well, I tried the first time, didn't happen. I'm going to go again. And, you know, I was ready to go. And then all of a sudden, Discovery Channel just contacted me out the blue, just randomly. And they said, I heard, well, you're going to do this run again. Do you mind if we send film crew and film you? And I was like, yeah, cool, why not? You know, I used to be a photographer. Sharing my story visually kind of sounded exciting, you know, in the form of creating a visual memory of it. And they did. And it was great. You know, I was worried though, I have to be honest. I was worried that they would try and really dramatize it and make it a big Hollywood thing and, you know, like, add all this fake Jeopardy and that sort of thing. But actually they were pretty good. Like most of the time they just gave me a GoPro. And then sometimes they were hiding in the bushes and stuff. And then whenever I stopped, they would come and obviously they would be interviewing me. So there's just, you know, someone with a camera asking me questions, how I feel. But most of the time I was sort of self-shooting. And I have to say, I was super happy with the results. You know, they didn't turn me into the sort of character I then now have to pretend to be for the rest of my life. You know, I felt I was me in it. And they weren't forcing me to do stuff. They weren't making me do stuff again, you know, because I was worried I'd sort of run downhill. They'd be like, oh no, right, cool, good. Can you just do that again so that we can get it from a different angle? There was none of that, and that was super cool, you know.
I was going to ask you, how have you turned these events into being, documentaries? But it sounds like that just came out of the blue then, did it?
Completely out the blue. I mean, since when I finished the swim, Ben Fogel was amazing to me. You know, like a week after, he invited me to this charity event in London, and you know, it was hilarious. It was in Mayfair, glitz and glamour and expensive bottles of champagne around, and you know, there was I can't remember the charity angle, but they were launching a Alfred Dunhill, Johnny Walker whiskey collaboration as well. And they gave me an expensive bottle with my name engraved on it. I was just like, what's going on here? Anyway, he was super kind, you know, him and his wife, Marina, they were like, you know, you should totally, you know, we'll put you on to our book agent so you can get a good book deal for the swim because you deserve it. And, you know, here's some production people who might be interested in working with you in the future. And you know what, I have to be honest, like, it was all like sort of almost publicly said in amongst a group of people. You know, Ben was telling me this, and a part of me was like, man, that was just all talk. I'm going to get home tomorrow and I'm never going to hear from him ever again. So anyway, that night finished and it was hilarious. Ben was like, oh, where's your hotel? We'll put you in a taxi off to your hotel. And I was like, no, sweet, I'm good. Anyway, because I was too embarrassed to tell him I was sleeping in the back of my car up in North. So I went to like this real fancy night in Mayfair and like went up back to North London and it was only a hatchback with 2 doors. So I had to like, sleep in the boot, feet in the boot. It was great. I loved it. But anyway, literally the next day, him and Marina were like emailing me, like, this is a good speaking agent who will get you a good book deal, and they have good connections with Random House Penguin, who I eventually went with. This person will help you out with, because loads of people are going to be wanting a piece of the Sean Conway pie. And I was like, what? Really? Come on. But he was right. People were just bombarding me and just wanting a piece of the action. And it was difficult. Like there was some cool opportunities, but there was also people just really wanting to take the piss, really. So anyway, I had chatted with some people about some TV programs. And I wasn't really into it. Like I didn't really feel like that's the direction I wanted to take it. Because a lot of them were just, you could sort of, it was more like presentery kind of things and some weird reality shows. Like someone wanted me to go into a forest in Alaska and build a cabin with some celebrity that I'd never heard of, but apparently they were famous. And I'm like, it'd be great. I think they were going to call the show Cabin Fever or something. And I'm like, the world thinks I'm a swimmer. Like, what? Like, why am I? And they just wanted to capitalize on the fact that I was front page at the Times and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of steering clear of that. But then when Discovery just said, listen, you do what you got to do. We're going to send cameras and film it. I thought, well, actually, that's kind of more in line with what I felt like I wanted to do. So I did that. And then I did the triathlon.
Yeah, then you turned into a triathlon. You kind of, for somebody that wasn't born in Britain, you've kind of traveled it as well as anybody.
I mean, this is like, so I grew up, with this sort of fantasy of Peter Rabbit and, and just this idea in my head of what Britain was like was just this amazing, beautiful, lush island, and it is, man, so I'd grown up with this fantasy of beautiful Britain and the rolling countryside and all that sort of thing. And it's true, man, so I've always been super passionate about exploring Britain because, we all go, it's so easy now just to go, well, I'm just going to go travel everywhere else. And it's quite scary, the amount of talks I do and I say, right, who's never been north of Edinburgh? And the amount of people who are in their 40s, 50s, who live like in Manchester, go, yeah, actually, I've been to Edinburgh, but I've never been north of Edinburgh. I'm like, how? Like,
I've been to Australia, I've been to New Zealand,
yeah, exactly.
I've been to Brazil, but I don't, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't travel abroad. In fact, I think traveling to other cultures and exploring other cultures is one of the most important things we all can do because it makes us more sympathetic with other people's way of thinking and, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, so traveling is super important, but also we live on an awesome island. It's safe. Nothing wants to kill you. It's beautiful. People are friendly and heartwarming and kind. And yeah, it's amazing.
And that's one of the things that rings true in all of your book and your documentaries is that you just kind of have this, it's to do with your nature, but you just attract generosity from all angles, don't you? You get people helping you because of what you're trying to do and because of the way you go about it. And there's just, they do make you kind of improve your outlook on humanity, I think, because there's so much generosity and assistance that goes on through these things. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And, I think In the Edge, which was so that's the triathlon, isn't it? And so did Discovery Channel originally film that and that's now on Amazon, or is that on Amazon? I don't know how that worked.
It was Discovery. So, okay. Yeah. So I have no idea about what happens once I get to the end and it's sort of like, right, that's it. Then I genuinely, I have no idea. What they they've obviously done a deal with Amazon, which is great because it means more people can watch it. Because I have to say that was the one slight disappointment I had was Discovery is a at the time it was a paid for subscription service in the UK. So it didn't reach as many people as I was hoping. I was sort of hoping it would land up on a free, like put it on YouTube or something. Like at least then the whole world can see it for free and it's more accessible. And that was kind of annoying. So it was annoying. I don't want to sound ungrateful because it wasn't that annoying because I still got to reach loads of people and it still went to 49 countries around the world. So don't get me wrong, but I found in Britain especially, Discovery Channel wasn't a huge big platform that everyone could watch, which is why it's great now and it would have been back then. It's just Amazon Prime wasn't really as big of a thing back then, right? It's great that it's now on Amazon Prime, but the latest documentary I'd done, I decided to work, sort of do it, self-produce it, work with an independent filmmaker. And we've now, for that reason, it is on Amazon and we've left on Amazon for a bit. And now we've just put it on Vimeo, just so that anyone in the world can sort of have access to that, which is great. I think that's a better thing for everyone,
And is that Europe or bust?
Yeah, Europe or bust. So that was the dream of trying to get the third F in my 3 Fs of endurance. So I had this big dream of trying to get a world's first, a world's furthest, and a world's fastest. And so this was the fastest one that I'd failed so many times at,
Oh, was it because it was your 6th attempt, I think, wasn't it? Is that right?
Let me count now. Well, I count the Land's End to John O'Groats attempt, even though it wasn't a real attempt. So I'd heard about the Land's End John O'Groats cycle record, which was at the time 44 hours. And I thought, how close can I get to that? So I went down to Land's End. This is 2008 now. I did no training. I did a bit of training, but not really. And I had a massive 50 kg setup nearly. Anyway, I thought, I'll see how close I can get to 2 days. Anyway, 25 days later, I rocked up in John O'Groats. So anyway, that put me in my place. But no, I tried the round the world record. I tried Route 66 bike record. I tried the Europe first time round. And I kind of tried the Land's End John O'Groats, but not really. And then, so Europe again was...
And this was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed this. Cycling is the one of the 3 that I enjoy most. And the idea of cycling from Portugal to the other side of Russia is just absolutely insane. And yet it's, and the kind of challenges you have to overcome consistently. Actually, I think the challenges you overcame, it came across more in the edge. The challenges you had to overcome, particularly with your raft face.
Yeah.
That clearly, your self. I couldn't help but laugh out. I was watching it on the iPad while my wife was watching something else. Couldn't help but laugh out loud when you said, "Who knew that fiberglass isn't waterproof?" And you bought a waterproof.
What? It is waterproof. Honestly, like a boat is fiberglass. Like I didn't realize there was this other resin coating. Not resin. They had this can't even remember what it is now.
Rubber gel or something.
Yeah, like the gel coats. Like, who knew that?
So your raft, the thing that's carrying all your stuff to keep it dry for the entirety of your swim is not even waterproof. You're like that must. But it must be so frustrating at the time.
It was again. It's these things where you have so much planning to do at the beginning. I'm just thinking, I sort of putting things away, like, right, what do I have to deal with now? And what can I fix if it breaks while I'm doing it? And sort of when I built the raft, I sort of put it, so I lived on the boats now. I was living on the boat. So I just put it in the canal next to me. And I saw it floated. I didn't push it in and leave it for ages. And I thought I'd done it. I genuinely thought I'd done a good job. I wasn't all fiberglass. I used plastic sheeting, which I fiberglassed the corners and the edges to. And in between that, I'd put spray foam and I'd silicone sealant. Like I really genuinely thought I'd just done a good job. But, all you need, I was swimming 4 or 5 hours a session, you need a pinprick, a pinprick in the fiberglass, and it'll fill up eventually.
Well, of course, the waves are just hitting it time and again, aren't they? And that, so even if it's robust at the start, it's going to take. It took a fair old battering, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because I was swimming from east to west, all the waves were coming into me, so I'm swimming through the waves, and every time the wave hit the raft, it would tug back on my hips because the raft was attached to my hips by a bungee cord, and it was. Yeah, I left it too last minute, basically, to build the raft. I left it too last minute. I sort of had all this other stuff to do, and I was like, I'll quickly do it. And that wasn't very successful.
Well, of all of these incredible challenges, what's been your favourite so far?
None of them, really. Genuinely, none of them are nice at the time. But you look back at them and you're proud of the achievement. So, but people ask me this before, and my what I normally say is cycling around the world is amazing. Like, you travel great distances fairly cheaply, and you can just get around the world and with your own two legs. And if you want, you only really have to take maybe 6 months off your life, which in the grand scheme of your life isn't a big deal. And I still think it's one of the most important things you could do as a youngster, and I say that now, but I would be pushing my son out the door to cycle around the world. I say that now, but when he gets there, I'll be like, whoa, it's too dangerous. Yeah. So, you learn so much. So that's fun while you're doing it. The record isn't fun. But then swimming the length of Britain, I think, was the thing that really changed my sort of overall perception of my ability, which then allowed me to do other stuff in life. So I think I'll always look back on the swim as being in a special place. And also, the swim was still, I was just trying to prove to myself that I could do something big. There was no sort of, and there's no hidden agenda now even, but still, part of me is like, I love writing. So there's a part of me that now goes, oh, if I do this, I'll be able to write about it. Whereas the swim was just all about the swim, There was no ulterior sort of side of, there was no like, oh, if I do it, I'm going to get sponsorship deals and I'm going to get blah, 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 blah. And there still isn't that now. However, I do have a family to support, and I do love writing. Genuinely, I love writing, and I've written 6 books. And so, a little bit of me now thinks about the bigger picture whenever I do a big challenge. Because I genuinely enjoy it. I love creating a very powerful talk presentation to give to Microsoft and Google and that. I enjoy making those presentations. I enjoy writing the books. I enjoy going on podcasts talking about these things. So now I'm aware of all that. I sort of incorporate it into each challenge, which is great because I love it. But also there's that certain naivety of doing things early on, and Mark Beaumont also says it, like doing stuff before social media was a big thing and before you had cameras on your phones and all that sort of thing, like when I cycled Land's End to John O'Groats, so paper maps. I remember I had one of my panniers was just paper. So I had paper maps, a camping guidebook, a British Lonely Planet, and a book to read. Yeah, an actual physical Wilbur. And, that was just one pannier. And then, and then I had another pannier, which was just like 2 cameras. So I had a big SLR and a small little point and shoot, because I still had like a Nokia little silly thing that just had buttons, So, it was great. It was great to have done it that way. But it's also great now to be able to share it more easily with photos and things like that.
And was the fact that the swim is, looking back, probably the highlight of what have clearly been all amazing adventures, but painful at the time? Was it also linked to the fact that the swim you were actually doing with other people, weren't you? You'd got the lady that was on the kayak, you'd got your skipper, which I know changed halfway through, you'd got the I think there was one other person on the boat.
Oh, yeah.
Was that part of it? Because obviously the one thing with endurance sport is it's very easy to make it a very lonely sport, as you know, particularly when you're doing your self-supported stuff. Do you think that was a factor in it as well?
Truthfully, no. I hate people. No, I'm very much. I really enjoy doing stuff on my own. I actually found having a crew quite difficult actually, because I spent half the time worrying that they were having a good time, and or worrying that they were going to leave. Like if I lost, one crew member, I couldn't carry on. So I'm trying to make sure 3 people who are giving up their time for free because I didn't have enough funds to pay them, are going to stay. So it's like, well, so half the time I'm just like trying to balance me, achieving the dream and achieving the goal. And then the other half is just like, oh my God, are they happy? Are they going to stay? What are they getting out of this? It was important for me to know that they were achieving something within the swim as well, rather than just following a guy with blue tack in his ears who can't hear you doing 1 mile an hour. So yeah, I have to say I found having a support crew quite hard work. And also I'm quite particular the way I do things. I'm a monkey terrier in my head, and I bounce between them quite regularly. My wife hates it. Half the time I'm like a monkey, and I'm inquisitive. I test things, I try things, I break things, I try and fix them, and I'm always a bit scatty until I find something to chase, and then all of a sudden nothing else matters. And it'll be little things, like we'll be sitting around to dinner, and she'll be like, I quite fancy my office. So my wife runs her own business, and I'm in her office now, which is the white walls, because I've taken everything down, because she's like, I quite fancy painting the my office a slightly different color, but it's just white. It's a bit boring. And literally, like halfway through, I was like, cool, right, what do you want? We've got to do it. So literally, I went and bought some paint, and I've already started up there. So I started doing the skirting, and literally, she couldn't have a conversation with me for the rest of the meal, because I was just in like, right, got to paint your office mode, and I was just like, right, now I've got something to chase, and I've got to do it. So yeah, and so people find that annoying, because they don't know if I'm a monkey or a terrier, and how to deal with me. So it's just easier for me and for everyone if I just kind of do stuff on my own.
Yeah, right. Very interesting. And on your website, you've got a list of things that you want to do, but do you know what's next? I mean, there's some amazing. I love the idea of running the length of Africa, and we're massive fans of South Africa, and and obviously you growing up there, I can understand why kind of running to Cape Town would be incredible. But have you kind of decided what's next?
No, not really. The things on my website are sort of the long-term goals that I want to do much later in life.
Wow.
I'd love to live on an island, and I have a saved search on on Google for islands for sale in Scotland, because every now and then someone sells like an island that's literally probably the size of your bedroom, but they sell it for like £10 or something, and you can't do anything with it, but other than put a tent on it, and that's about it really. I'd love to sort of live maybe on a slightly bigger island, but I'd love to live on an island for a year and survive. I'd love to do an Arctic triathlon. In fact, I was going to do that a couple of years ago, but in my head I had this dream about this beautifully filmed art film about me doing this Arctic Ironman. And with like going into the frozen water and all this sort of thing. But actually, someone then said, actually, to go that far north, where you want those conditions, it's dark half the time. So, because in the summer it's all melted, so you don't get the feeling. So I was like, oh, actually, that kind of like I want to do it, but I know I can kind of do it. But in my head, I wanted to create this sort of like really beautifully filmed art film. So that's kind of why I haven't done that one for a while. And then I always thought I'd sort of do Africa later in life with kids, with older kids, and the whole family. Why not? And yeah, cycling is my favorite thing. So you never know.
Brilliant. And I can't help but come on to nutrition. So I speak to a lot of people on this podcast, and I was just recently interviewing somebody that runs a company called 33 Fuel, which is all about vegan-based protein and super healthy, superfood-based endurance products. And then there's, other people are, kind of very nutrition focused. And then I watch your stuff, and you're eating dog food, raw fish eyes, liquefying Sunday lunches. Is this kind of the act of desperation en route, and you're normally a super healthy guy, or do you just kind of like, because you do so much exercise, you just kind of eat whatever?
So I'm super healthy at home. So basically we're mostly vegetarian, Monday to Thursday at home. So from Monday to Thursday, we actually have one of those subscription box meals where they deliver all the ingredients to your door, and it's vegetarian Monday to Thursday. Friday we have fish. Saturday's kind of like anything goes. If the weather's good, we'll usually have a barbecue. And then Sunday we have a family roast. Granny and granddad come around, and that's a good thing. But yeah, for the most time we're pretty healthy. And generally, if you can dig it out of the ground, pick it off a tree, or catch it, cook it and eat it, that's kind of the philosophy I kind of go for. So it's very rare that I'll have anything that's had, some sort of process in between. Sometimes I'll have pasta every now and then, but we mainly just have potatoes, sweet potatoes. Have some bread sometimes. I've been trying to get into cooking my own bread, baking my own bread, which is kind of fun, although it doesn't taste very good at the moment. I'm still perfecting that art. So I'm super healthy. But, the reason when I'm doing a big challenge and I'm self-supported, it's just desperation. It's better to eat the wrong thing than nothing. And you've just got to find what you can fit in your stomach when you can find it. And that's why I have in the past landed up eating, as you say, dog food and blending a Sunday roast to make it absorb quicker and things like that. But it's definitely not by choice. It's just sort of desperation.
And what is your choice for fueling long bike rides or long runs? Is there a particular trick, or is there a particular kind of food substance that you tend to go to that that really helps?
Yeah, so it's a mixture. It depends what you're doing. It depends on what your heart rate is. It depends, how much power you're pushing out. If, for example, I'm cycling and it's flat and there's no hills, then I can kind of sustain on a pretty high fat diet. Once my heart rate's above 145, I'm pretty much burning 100% carbohydrates. So you can have the best low fat, high fat diet in the world, but if you're running a high heart rate, you're going to need some carbs for that. So there's a mixture. Sort of my go-to fuel at the moment is so if I had ideal situations where someone can just hand me what I want. At the moment, my breakfast smoothie is I have hemp seeds, flax seeds, kale powder, spirulina, put some some almond butter in there, some coconut oil, some fruit, depending on how I feel, sometimes banana, sometimes just frozen fruit, various things, a bunch of honey, and some oat powder as well to bulk it up. And that seems to be pretty good for me. I've got a lot of fats in the nuts and the seeds, and then some carbs and a little bit of honey just for a little bit of faster carbohydrate, and a little bit for the flavor as well, so you're not hating the experience. So that seems pretty good. But peanut butter or any nut butters for me work pretty well, and they're super high calorie, and keep me going. The other thing is I have a salt deficiency, so I have to have tons of salt. I have to have nearly 40 grams of salt a day when I'm pushing it hard and I'm sweating.
Wow.
I lose about 3.4 grams of salt an hour in 30 degree heat when I'm sweating a liter an hour. So yeah, I'm just anything with salt. So crisps, for example, I'll actually pretty good for me. They got high fat, high salt, high carbohydrate. Because a bag of crisps is, crisps are usually between 510 and 520 calories per 100 grams, which is amazing. That's up there with trail mix, which is usually around 600 and something. So again, depending what you're doing. But generally, sweet potatoes, nut butters, and some seed powders and things like that. I very rarely, if ever, in fact, my wife laughs. I never have sugary things. I don't like chocolate. I don't like sweets like Haribo. I don't take gels and that sort of thing. I don't drink fizzy drinks. The only liquid I drink, I have a 2-liter bottle. So every day I have a 2-liter water bottle with times written down the side, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I have to drink the bottle as I go throughout the day. And then I drink tea, wine, and whiskey. That's pretty much all I drink, really.
Fantastic, good combination.
Yeah, so I don't drink fizzy drinks. I don't drink fruit juices. I don't drink any of that sort of stuff.
And what about when you're out on the bike? What's your go-to nutrition?
Nothing. No, I don't eat. I often, unless I'm going out for more than 2 hours. If I'm going out for more than 2 hours, I'll probably try and take some sort of peanut butter thing. Sometimes I'll take a peanut butter sandwich, but do it on flatbread maybe. Literally, I'll have layered up with peanut butter, a little bit of honey on there, and some salt. I'll actually sprinkle some salt into that and have it in my jersey back pocket. Otherwise, I don't really like oat cakes. I'm so over the flavor of oats from the swim. When I swam Britain, I was just eating raw oats because we couldn't boil. We didn't have enough. The stove was so crap, it would take an hour to boil up some oats. So I was just eating raw oats, and after that, I just kind of lost the will to have anything oat-based. But yeah, generally, in fact, at the moment, I'll go for a 2-hour run. I'll do a half marathon now, and I won't take anything. No water, no food, nothing. And it's slow. I'm taking 2 hours to do a half marathon, and I still won't take anything. And I kind of like it that way. At the moment, it's not ideal, and I come home a bit dehydrated. But I try and fill my belly up beforehand, and I kind of prefer the freedom than running with a pack or carrying a water bottle.
You're not one of these ultra runners that's literally eating pizza on the run.
I would do, yeah, like Dean Panazis. Dean's a machine. 100%. Pizza's actually great. It's got a lot of carbs, got a lot of fat, usually a bit of protein there as well, depending what pizza you get. If I'm going long and I need to do something, 100%, yeah, I'll order a pizza and we'll stop it and do something. But again, it's not ideal, if I had it my way and I had a support crew on doing something, I would create some sort of smoothie, a bit like what I just explained, and probably use that to fuel me throughout the day with slight variations. Because if you get flavor fatigue, you just vomit everything up again, and that's not fun.
And then a beer at the end of the day, because I in the book, in the TV programs, there's always a beer at the end of the day, or at 2,000 miles, whichever. But let's face it, you deserve it at that point.
Well, so I'm I'm just conforming to the old school Tour de France nutritional strategies. If you see some of the footage of the old school, with the Tour de France, there used to be long stages, like 500 miles. It's amazing. You should see, they used to have wine tables on the side of the road, and these riders would ride, especially towards the last sort of 100 miles where they're tired and they've been going forever, and they'd get wine and be necking wine and be putting wine in their jersey back pockets. It was phenomenal. And I thought, well, there we go. I'm going to give that. I don't overdo it. A beer or two at the end of the day kind of makes you a little bit relaxed. As long as you stay hydrated, it doesn't, it's not great for your muscle recovery either, to be honest, but you kind of still feel the pain, but you just care less about it,
Yeah, it's good for the mental side of the recovery, if nothing else, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And there is a general theme in your stories where you seem to try and take regular shortcuts, and I'm not sure I've seen one actually pay off yet. There's you're trying to go across what was it, the pools area where you sort of bought a dinghy and that kind of backfired, and then there's like multiple examples of shortcuts that didn't pay off. But have you got any shortcuts for people that that want to get better at endurance sport, that you'd say those were the sort of things that kind of made the biggest difference, whether they were big or small ideas?
Oh, I do get asked this a lot. And the problem with like proper endurance stuff is, unfortunately, there's no real shortcuts. And you speak to the runners. The people who are going for sub 100K races. They'll be varying their training. They're going to be doing HIIT sessions. They'll be doing some power sessions. They might do a bit of CrossFit and stuff like that. But the people doing your 100 milers and more running races, they very rarely do anything else other than just run, because you've got to be robust. Once you're robust, once you get to that level that you can compete and complete a 100-mile race, then you can sort of do stuff of variety, and it's good to just keep your muscles, do different things. But yeah, I mean, I kind of also am a bit anti this whole concept of like taking shortcuts, even though I try many times while I'm doing them. But I think, what tips, if you want to do stuff, I think I fall into this category. When I'm wanting to do big endurance events, I think I need to just be going out and doing one big long run a week. If I'm like, if I can run a half marathon every Saturday, I'm going to get better. But actually, it's often better just to chip away at it, just chip away. It's like when I write my book. I used to think, I need to commit 3 weeks of writing, and now I'm going to do the writing. But actually, I do what Hemingway did. He writes 300 words a day in the morning before 9 a.m. and that's him done, And actually, I find, to train for endurance stuff, certainly at the beginning, of course, you have to be going and doing your long days, but just chip away at it at the beginning, enjoy it, because I find sometimes, and I think this is the biggest reason people quit too early on when they're trying to do an Ironman or an ultra, is they go out too big at the beginning and then realize how hard it is and go, I'm never going to be able to do it. So they pull the plug. Whereas actually, if you just go out and run, at the moment, I'm actually only going, I'm doing a big week this week. I'll do 100 Ks running this week. But before that, I was sort of doing, 30, 40 Ks a week, just every day, doing a little bit here and there. And that kind of just keeps you kind of like ticking over. It makes you start enjoying the process and that sort of thing. But if you want to get better quicker, then just go and do it. Like, just go and do it. When I ran the length of Britain, day one, I barely managed a half marathon. By the end, I was running 40, 50 miles, and that's in a 30-day period. So in a month, I went from struggling to do a half marathon, and this is with a 7 kg rucksack as well, to being able to do a double marathon, but within 30 days, which is phenomenal. I mean, it hurt a lot. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't fun, and it wasn't the best way to do it. But certainly you can probably push yourself a little bit harder than you think. But then again, a curveball in that situation is injury. You've got to balance the injury gods and keep them sweet as well. So yeah, but I'd say just kind of just chip away at the block at the beginning and do it because you love it rather than do it so that you keep loving it rather than sort of going out too hard too soon, and that sort of thing.
I think that's great advice. I mean, I was talking about this with a guy called Mitch Phillips, who's I think he's the head of sport at Reuters, and he was saying his thing was there's no such thing as junk miles. If you're enjoying it, then actually, and it's doing you good, even if it's not doing you as much good as doing a particular drill would do you. You're not getting faster because of it, then actually it's still doing you a huge amount of good. And I would completely buy into that. Other than your 6 books and the programs that are on, the documentaries that are on Amazon, are there any particular books that are your go-tos that you've thought you've read and you've gone that's been really helpful, or books or not even books but necessarily podcasts that you kind of regularly recommend to other people, or any particular sources that have helped you along the way?
Oh man, I've been devouring books lately, and it's what's the last book that I read was really good? Anna McNuff. Her books are great. So she's done. I've read 2 of hers. One was when she ran the length in New Zealand, and the other one was when she cycled all 50 states in America. And she's got a really great way of sort of talking about her adventures, and she writes really well, really, really well. Jamie McDonald, her fella, he just finished his book actually yesterday when he ran across Canada, and actually it's sort of his backstory of that. James Cracknell and Ben Fogle's books they've done together, The Crossing and The Race to the Pole, they were quite fun because they were they both write them, so it's sort of alternate ways of thinking, fighting against each other, which is great. I think the best book I've read in the last sort of year, it was probably 2 years ago now when I read it again, was Shackleton's book. That just his journey was just wow. You just like I would have given up and just gone, right, I'm dead. There we go. That was it. I had a good go at it. But they just had this belief that they were going to survive, and you're just like, how did you just think it was worth carrying on? I urge everyone to read that, or I think it's probably on Audible as well.
Brilliant. Well, I'll be adding all of those to my reading list. My reading list is expanding rapidly, but fortunately.
And the other one, actually, another really good book is George Mahood, when he did Land's End to John O'Groats with no money, and literally started with no clothes. He had his underwear at Land's End Hotel, and he was trying to get to John O'Groats with no money. It's amazing. He was going into pubs and offering to wash their dishes for food, and it's really well written.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, what I love about what you're doing and the books that you're talking about is, and I haven't really, one of the things that I loved about kind of doing the Ironman and doing this sort of stuff is it's taken me to parts of the world that I wouldn't have ever gone to ordinarily. Certainly your trips have. And I massively enjoyed the traveling I did after university, but I hadn't really thought about how the linking of the traveling and the endurance sport. But you've certainly nailed that combination, and I can absolutely see why it's compelling to keep doing more and more, because both are just absolutely brilliant.
Well, exactly. And I'm not a very good traveler because the monkey in me doesn't like it, nor does the terrier in me, because I find I get bored easily and I have nothing to chase. So that's why adding some sort of physical challenge within the world of travel kind of, allowed me to sort of, scratch my terrier's belly, as it were, which gave me that focus, and that really helped.
Brilliant. And my very last question, which is actually from my youngest daughter, Bronwyn, another good Welsh name, is just watching. She was watching part of the Europol bus with me, and she said, he's trying to be aerodynamic. Why the beard? Now, I think I know the answer from Hell and High Water, but why the beard when you're trying to be so aerodynamic? Or does it just not make any difference?
Well, actually, it doesn't make a difference. If you Specialized did a wind tunnel test with beards, and because it's in front of your chest, actually your chest is bigger than your beard anyway. So apparently it made no difference. But leg hair was 40 seconds per 25 mile at race pace. Obviously, the slower you go, the less of a margin it makes. Apparently, leg hair was a big one. But beard,
okay, yeah. I thought that was a bit of a myth. I thought it was all down to avoiding road rash. But
it's that too. But according, if you watch the Specialized video, that's what they claim. But yeah, no, I grew it on the swim for jellyfish, and then after that, just got too lazy, and then met my wife, and we had a rule. It's quite good actually. When we met, literally, I think it was within like a few hours, we sort of made this pact that, because we met at the Kendall Mountain Festival up in the Lake District, and we're sort of sitting down chatting to each other, and we knew we kind of we sort of planned a date for coming up. So I knew I was going to have a date with this Welsh hottie, and but we actually, and she said it. She said, "We're going on a date, but the rule is we're not allowed to Google each other before." And I thought, actually, that is brilliant. Because one, I look way cooler on the internet than I am in real life. So I want you to be disappointed. And it's great. And you know what? We've never, even then, we've kept this sort of rule that we can't search each other online. I think we were married before we were actually Facebook friends as well. You know, like it was super important, and it's great. So anyway, basically, my wife's never seen me without a beard, and she quite likes it. So I'm worried if I do get rid of it, I'll also get divorced. So it's here to stay now.
Fantastic, brilliant. Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you a little bit better. As I said, I absolutely loved the book. I really enjoyed watching the Amazon things. I highly recommend everybody else checks them out. I think the best way to find out a bit more about you is it SeanConway.com, I think, is that right?
Yeah, everything's there.
Everything's there, and a whole load more stuff that I didn't know about you as well. So it's been absolutely brilliant. A huge thank you for taking out time to share some of these stories with us.
Anytime, mate. Yeah, thank you for inviting me on. It's been great.
What an incredible guy, and what a lovely guy. But he's just achieved the most amazing things, and he makes it sound so easy just to go and cycle around the world. And actually, that sounds like quite a good idea, but I would love to do it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. So much to learn from such an amazing guy. And also what's interesting is how he's turned what he loves into his career, and how he's made a career out of doing these adventures. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed chatting to him. Don't forget to share your Instagram photos with the hashtag TRIBEathlon. I just want to see those amazing training photos with you and your tribe. This podcast was brought to you by Lucky Saint alcohol-free beer. You can find out more at luckysaint.co. It is my absolute favourite alcohol-free beer. I said if you held on, I'd give you a discount code. That discount code is LUCKYTRI20. So Lucky, spelt as you'd expect, Try, spelt T-R-I, and then 20. Go to luckysaint.co, use the discount code LUCKYTRI20, and you'll get a lovely 20% off your order. I hope you enjoy your alcohol-free, hangover-free beer. And don't forget to download the TRIBEathlon app for more amazing podcasts, but also to help you train, compete, and to build your tribe.